Evolution handed humans the most powerful brain on Earth, and some people use it for revenge. Not smart revenge, reckless plans that take weeks to build and seconds to collapse. Today, we're covering 12 real Darwin Award cases where revenge didn't just fail, it completely destroyed the person behind it. Every single one forgot the same question. What happens if this goes wrong? The answer: everything. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, subscribe now, and now, let's begin. 1. The wrong car, the right evidence. A man with automotive knowledge and a deep grievance against his former employer decided that the cleanest revenge available to a person who understood engines was to destroy one. Specifically, he planned to introduce a compound into the oil system of his former boss's personal vehicle that would, over a period of weeks, cause progressive and irreversible engine damage in a way that would appear to be simple mechanical failure. He identified the target vehicle. He obtained access to the parking area after hours. He applied his substance. He left without incident. Over the following days, he listened for news of an engine failure. None came. He waited 2 weeks. Still nothing. He began to wonder if the compound had worked at all. He decided he needed to observe the vehicle again and possibly repeat the application. He returned to the parking area. He had, during his original visit, worked in poor light and made an error in identifying the vehicle. He had applied his substance to a car that belonged to a different employee who drove a similar model in the same color. That vehicle had been taken to a mechanic for a pre-existing unrelated issue within days of his visit. The mechanic had discovered the contamination immediately and reported it. By the time he returned for his follow-up visit, the parking area had been equipped with 2 additional security cameras, specifically because of the contamination incident, which was already under active investigation. He walked into frame, moved directly to the vehicle lineup, and spent 4 minutes examining cars in a way that, combined with his professional background and his documented connection to the employer, resolved the investigation within 72 hours. His target's car had functioned perfectly throughout. He did not survive the subsequent legal process. The stress of the investigation and the proceedings, combined with an underlying cardiac condition that had gone unmanaged, resulted in a fatal event 3 months after charges were filed. The oil compound had worked exactly as intended, on the wrong car, belonging to a person who had nothing to do with the dispute. 2. The fence that forgot whose side it was on. A man whose vegetable garden had been repeatedly raided by his neighbor's free-ranging chickens decided, after 2 seasons of destroyed crops and zero cooperation from the neighbor, that the legal system and polite conversation had both failed him. He would solve the problem with electricity. He researched electric fencing. He learned that farmers used it to manage livestock. He purchased a transformer. He wired the fence himself over a single weekend, working methodically, connecting the perimeter wire to the power supply and testing the circuit continuity with a meter. What his research did not cover was the fundamental difference between a properly calibrated livestock fencing system, which uses precisely timed, low-duration pulses designed to startle an animal without causing lasting harm, and a fence wired directly to an unregulated transformer, which delivers continuous current at a level that is not calibrated for anything. His fence was not calibrated. It was simply powered. The chickens tested it on the 3rd morning after installation. A brief contact with the wire, a startled retreat, and they found a different route into the garden that bypassed the fence at a corner post he had not secured properly. He went outside the following morning to inspect the fence and check whether his system had been effective. He walked the perimeter. He came to a section near the irrigation line where the soil was heavily saturated from an overnight leak he had not yet noticed. He crouched down to examine the wire connection at a post in this area. Damp soil. Both hands touching the wire bracket and the metal post simultaneously. An unregulated transformer running continuous current. The chickens were observed later that morning on the other side of the fence, still finding their way into the garden through the unsecured corner. 3. The beekeeper's last delivery. Some revenge plots are subtle, quiet, calculated. This one involved a live beehive, a modified catapult, and a man who genuinely believed the laws of physics were optional for people with strong feelings. A farmer in rural Central Europe had spent 3 years in a property dispute with his neighbor. 3 years of fences knocked down, livestock let loose, and legal letters ignored. By year 3, the farmer had stopped talking to lawyers and started talking to his bees. He owned a large active beehive, tens of thousands of bees, constantly angry, constantly looking for a reason to ruin someone's afternoon. His plan was to build a launch mechanism, load the hive onto it, and catapult it directly into his neighbor's garden during a family gathering. Chaos, panic, dozens of stings, and he would be watching from a safe distance with a clear conscience and perfect deniability. He spent an entire weekend constructing the device. A counterweight trebuchet built from fence posts, old rope, and what neighbors later described as a level of commitment that should have been directed literally anywhere else. He tested the arm. He calculated the angle. He loaded the hive on launch morning. Here is what he did not calculate. Trebuchets generate recoil. When the counterweight drops and the arm snaps forward, the frame experiences significant lateral force. If the ground beneath that frame is slightly uneven, and he had built this on a sloped field, the whole structure twists on release. He was standing directly beside the machine to watch his masterpiece fly. The arm released. The hive launched. It traveled approximately 5 feet before the trebuchet frame buckled sideways and this returning arm caught him across the upper body with the full force of a counterweight system in motion. He went down. The hive came back down on top of him. The neighbor's garden party was unaffected. The neighbor did not even know the trebuchet existed until investigators arrived to document the scene the following day. The bees, for their part, were fine. Confused, but fine. He was not. The official report noted that the device had functioned as designed. The operator had simply positioned himself inside the blast radius of his own invention. So far, every single plan collapsed the same way. One small mistake. If you're still watching, hit subscribe because it only gets worse from here. 4. The trebuchet's cousin. A man whose neighbor had been operating a loud home workshop late into every evening, in consistent violation of local noise ordinances that the neighbor had been fined for and had ignored, decided that the appropriate response was to destroy the neighbor's vehicle using a large rock delivered from height in a way that could be attributed to natural causes. He identified a rocky ridge above the property that he could access through woodland. He visited the site. He identified a substantial boulder that was already partially unstable. His plan was to dislodge it at a time when the neighbor's vehicle was parked in the usual location below and nobody was in the direct fall path. He had timed the neighbor's schedule. He had observed the parking patterns. He had selected a date and time. He arrived at the ridge at the planned hour, confirmed the vehicle was in position, and began working this boulder free with a steel pry bar he had carried up the hill. The boulder was larger than it appeared from below. Getting it to move required him to position himself directly behind it and apply sustained leverage from a crouch. After several minutes of effort, it shifted. It did not go forward down the slope. The ground beneath the boulder had been undermined by the loosening process. The boulder rolled sideways and back. He was behind it. The neighbor's vehicle was untouched. The neighbor heard the sound from his workshop, investigated, found the scene on the ridge above his property, and called emergency services. The pry bar, his work gloves, and a notebook with handwritten timing observations were all recovered at the site. The workshop is still operating. The neighbor received a noise ordinance fine for the 3rd time the following month. 5. The self-addressed explosive. The use of remotely operated devices for revenge is, from a purely theoretical standpoint, appealing. You are far away. You press a button. Justice is delivered. You go home. The theory is flawless. The practice has certain requirements that this man did not meet. He had a dispute with a business rival that had escalated over the course of 2 years from professional competition into something considerably more personal. When he decided that conventional options had been exhausted, he purchased a commercially available hobby drone and began experimenting with attaching a small incendiary payload to it. He practiced flying for several weeks. He was genuinely competent. He studied the target location. He scouted a launch site with clear sightlines, and what he calculated was a safe operational distance. On the evening of his operation, he arrived at his launch point. Conditions at ground level were calm. He confirmed this by checking the tree branches around him. He powered the drone, verified the payload was secure, and launched. What he had not checked was the wind at altitude. At ground level, nothing moved. At 30 meters of elevation, a sustained crosswind had been running for hours. He could not feel it where he was standing. The drone climbed into it immediately. The GPS guidance system attempted to compensate, but the additional weight of the payload reduced the drone's responsiveness, and the crosswind was consistent and strong. The aircraft began a slow, curving arc. He worked the controller. The arc did not correct. The drone completed a wide parabolic turn and came back, The detonation occurred 11 feet from the launch position. His target received a visit from investigators the following week and was genuinely confused by the entire situation. He had been unaware of the plan at any stage. The drone's onboard flight log was recovered intact and contained a complete GPS record of the flight path. The evidence was described by investigators as unusually thorough. 6. The firework that read the room. Independence Day creates more Darwin Award candidates than almost any other calendar event, which is extraordinary given that the devices involved are explicitly designed to explode and people still appear shocked when they do so in unintended directions. A man whose car had been sideswiped in a parking lot by a neighbor who had then denied all knowledge of the incident, despite witnesses, decided that if the legal and insurance systems were going to be useless, he would communicate his displeasure in a language that was harder to ignore. He purchased a large commercial mortar firework. The kind that comes in a tube is meant to be buried several inches in stable ground, braced with sandbags, and operated from a minimum safe distance. He planned to launch it at the neighbor's fence at 2 in the morning as a declaration of intent. He set the launch tube on the flat surface of his own driveway. He did not read the setup instructions, which specify level ground and embedded depth requirements. The driveway had a slight slope toward the garage. The tube sat on this slope untethered. He lit the fuse. He stepped back 3 paces, which is not the minimum safe distance specified on the packaging. As the launch charge ignited, the tube's base slid 2 inches down the slope. The launch angle shifted from vertical to approximately 35 degrees. The shell did not go upward. It went horizontal, at low altitude, directly along the driveway, and struck his own garage door before detonating. The neighbor's fence was undamaged. The garage door was destroyed. The garage wall behind it was significantly damaged. The heat from the detonation ignited stored materials inside, and the resulting fire spread before he could respond with the garden hose. He suffered severe burns attempting to access the structure. He did not survive the burns. The neighbor's insurance adjuster noted the undamaged fence when processing the neighbor's unrelated claim later that month. 7. The laxative calculus. A man whose lunch had been stolen from a shared office refrigerator on multiple occasions decided that traps were better than complaints. He prepared a dish. He loaded it with a commercial laxative in a quantity that exceeded therapeutic doses by a significant margin. He labeled it clearly with his name, placed it in the refrigerator, and told 3 colleagues about the plan before it was executed. This last detail is important. The intended lunch thief did not access the refrigerator that day. A different colleague, one who had not been told about the trap, saw a clearly labeled container that appeared to belong to someone who had forgotten it, decided not to let food go to waste, and consumed a substantial portion. The medical response required an ambulance. The colleague was hospitalized. The investigation began immediately. All 3 people who had been told about the plan in advance provided their statements within the first day of questioning, as none of them had any interest in being implicated in what had become a criminal matter. The original architect of the plan was identified, interviewed, and charged. During the investigation, it was also established that he had told the 3 colleagues not just about the laxative but about several other planned escalations he had been considering for various workplace conflicts. These additional disclosures expanded the scope of the inquiry significantly. He was awaiting the resolution of multiple legal proceedings when he was involved in a road accident. Investigators later noted that distraction consistent with severe ongoing stress was a probable contributing factor. The person who had been stealing his lunches was identified during the workplace investigation. They received a verbal warning. He received considerably more than that. At this point, you'd think people would learn. No. If these stories are blowing your mind, subscribe to Blunder Vault. We've got more coming. 8. The carbon monoxide architect. There is a category of revenge that appeals to people who consider themselves above ordinary violence. The invisible revenge. The kind where no fingerprints exist, where the target suffers without ever knowing who caused it, and where the schemer watches from a distance feeling like a genius. This man was that kind of person. His former business partner had, by his account, stolen credit for a project, siphoned money from a shared account, and walked away looking like the hero while he looked like the failure. He wanted consequences that matched the crime. He wanted something that would look like an accident. He spent several weeks researching carbon monoxide. He learned that it is colorless, odorless, and accumulates in enclosed spaces when combustion equipment runs without adequate ventilation. He identified that his target's home garage contained an older gas water heater with a compromised flue. With minor modification, he could increase the CO output significantly and partially obstruct the ventilation. The garage was attached to the house. The math, in his mind, was elegant. He executed the modification during a night when the target was away. He worked carefully. He wore gloves. He was methodical. What he did not account for was his own vehicle. He had driven to the location and parked a short distance away, engine running, windows most of the way up, while he waited inside the car to confirm no witnesses were present before approaching the house. He waited 40 minutes. His car had a cracked exhaust manifold gasket that had been slowly leaking combustion gases into the cabin for weeks. He had driven with the window cracked every day without realizing it. Tonight, windows up, stationary, engine idling for an extended period. He was found by a passing driver who noticed a car sitting in a residential street with the engine running and nobody appearing to be awake inside. His target's garage was inspected during the subsequent investigation. The modification was discovered. The target experienced no ill effects because the water heater happened to have been turned off for maintenance that same week. He had built an invisible trap. He had walked past it, gotten into his own car, and been slowly killed by the exhaust system he had never bothered to repair. The modification he had made to his target's appliance was discovered. The target was fine. The investigation was brief. 9. The Wasp Whisperer. There is a particular category of revenge that sounds, in the planning phase, like poetic justice. Our sixth case involves a man whose co-worker had spread false information about him to management, resulting in a formal disciplinary action that he considered completely undeserved. He wanted his co-worker to experience sudden, uncontrollable, inescapable consequences. He sourced a live wasp nest. This step alone required him to locate, approach, and transport an active colony of stinging insects, which involved 2 separate incidents of being stung and 1 emergency room visit that he documented as a gardening accident to avoid questions. He transported the nest to the co-worker's home address on a weekday evening. He opened the residential mailbox. He inserted the nest. He closed the mailbox and retreated to his car, which was parked approximately 40 meters away, windows down, engine running. The co-worker arrived home and opened the mailbox. The response was immediate, as intended. The co-worker ran. The wasps pursued. The co-worker reached the front door and got inside. Several dozen agitated wasps dispersed across the surrounding area looking for additional targets. His car, 40 meters away, windows open, engine producing heat and exhaust, registered to the agitated swarm as a warm, chemically active environment worth investigating. He did not process what was happening quickly enough to close the windows before the first wasps entered the vehicle. He accelerated away from the curb while simultaneously being stung multiple times in the face and neck. He had a previously unknown, undocumented severe allergy to wasp venom. He had never been stung enough in one event to trigger anaphylaxis before. He lost consciousness approximately 200 meters from the co-worker's house. The vehicle left the road. The co-worker required treatment for multiple stings and recovered fully. The mailbox was documented as the origin point of the incident. The investigation identified him within 48 hours through vehicle registration. He had planned to deliver suffering by proxy. The wasps had not read the plan. 10. The Structural Engineer. A man who had been defrauded by a contractor had pursued the matter through civil court unsuccessfully and had exhausted every available formal channel, decided that the only remaining option was to make the contractor's life structurally uncomfortable in a very literal sense. His target was a small commercial building the contractor owned and operated from. His plan was to compromise the foundation of one load-bearing corner of the structure by excavating beneath it and removing critical support. He was not a structural engineer. He had watched several online videos about foundations. He obtained the necessary tools. He selected a night when the building would be unoccupied. He located the corner he had identified from exterior observation as structurally significant. He began excavating. The soil in the area was clay-rich and had been saturated by recent heavy rainfall. When he had removed enough material beneath the corner footing, the soil gave way not in the controlled, gradual manner he had anticipated, but suddenly and completely. The corner of the building dropped. The drop was not large, perhaps 8 inches, but it was immediate, and it pulled the adjacent wall sections inward with significant force. He was inside the excavation trench directly beneath the failing corner when this occurred. The building was inspected the following morning when the contractor arrived and noticed the structural damage. The excavation was discovered beneath the collapsed corner. Investigation confirmed the human remains were consistent with having been present during the structural failure. The contractor filed an insurance claim for the foundation repair. The repair cost was covered. We're not even at the worst one yet. Subscribe to Blunder Vault right now, because the last case is on another level. 11. The drone operator's miscalculation. A man who had been the subject of a sustained anonymous online harassment campaign had identified the person responsible and had reported it to authorities without result, decided that if institutions would not act, he would. His plan was to use a commercially available drone equipped with a thermal camera to document what he believed was illegal activity at the harasser's property, then use this documentation to force a law enforcement response. He had no evidence of illegal activity. He simply believed it was occurring and intended to find it. He operated the drone over the property on 3 separate nights, capturing footage. On the 3rd night, he flew closer than on previous occasions to get clearer imagery. The target property had a large dog that had begun reacting to the drone's presence on previous passes. On the 3rd night, the dog's reaction alerted the property owner, who came outside, observed the drone, and called police. Police arrived while he was still operating the drone from a position in a public area nearby. They identified him, examined his equipment, and reviewed his footage. The footage showed no illegal activity on the target's property. It did, however, show extensive footage of neighboring properties captured during approach and exit flights, including footage through residential windows, footage of a secured commercial property, and footage that violated local airspace regulations on multiple counts. He was detained and the equipment was seized. The harassment campaign against him was reviewed by a different investigator as part of the same process and ultimately could not be definitively attributed to the person he had targeted. During the legal proceedings that followed, he experienced a cardiac event in custody. He had a documented heart condition that had not been properly managed due to the stress of the preceding months. He died before the case was resolved. The person he had identified as his harasser was never charged. 12. The gravity audit. We close with a case that deserves to be in every physics textbook. Not because it is complicated, but because it is so simple, so perfectly preventable, and so completely the result of a man being so focused on what he wanted to happen that he forgot to check where he was standing when he made it happen. A man who had been cheated out of a significant sum of money by a former business partner had pursued every legal avenue available and had reached a point of complete institutional exhaustion, decided that the partner's car was the appropriate target for a message that could not be ignored. He would drop something heavy on it from height. He sourced a concrete planter, approximately 40 kilograms of solid cast concrete. He transported it to the roof level of a multi-story open-air parking structure near where the partner's car was typically parked during business hours. He identified the vehicle in the lot below. He confirmed the space directly below was clear of people. He stood at the edge wall of the roof level with the planter. He did not check the structural overhang. The parking structure had been designed with a significant cantilevered overhang on each level, a standard architectural feature intended to provide weather protection for the level below. This overhang extended outward from the floor where he was standing. Any object dropped from the edge wall would hit this overhang on the way down before reaching the vehicle level. He lifted the planter. He positioned it over the edge. He released it. The concrete planter struck the overhang edge approximately 1 meter below the roof level. The impact was high energy, and the concrete, being solid and heavy, did not deflect cleanly. It shattered. The main mass of the planter deflected back toward the roof edge. A significant fragment returned upward along the face of the structure. He was standing directly at the edge. The partner's vehicle, parked below, received a small chip in the windshield from a minor fragment that made it down to the vehicle level. The damage was later estimated at approximately $70. He was discovered at the base of the exterior structure. Investigators, upon reviewing the roof level, found scrape marks at the edge wall consistent with the planter's impact and a trajectory analysis that explained everything. The partner spent 300 years trying to resolve the business dispute in court. He eventually settled for a fraction of what he was owed. He was alive to complain about it. That distinction, it turns out, matters more than people realize until the moment it becomes relevant. 12 plans, 12 people, 12 deaths. Not bad luck, just one fatal mistake each. The anger was real, the plan felt perfect, but one detail went unchecked. And that's all it took. Because in revenge plots, the most dangerous person isn't the target, it's the one making the plan. Physics doesn't care about your reasons, gravity doesn't read intentions, and reality doesn't give second chances. The truth? The best revenge is simply moving on and staying alive. If this made you think twice, subscribe to Blunder Vault for more real stories every week. And now you know, some plans should stay in your head.